Honorable participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 2021 Korea Maritime Week. And now it's time to talk a little bit more and deeper on establishing digitalized land and maritime systems. So at this panel discussion session, we are joined by our chairperson, Mr. Sung Bae Hong, Director of Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and he will be leading the session. And as a panelist, we're joined by Dr. Jin Young Park, a Senior Director of Korea Research Institute of Ships and Ocean Engineering. And also we're joined by Dr. Sang Hyun Park, Head of Marine PNT Research Team. So they are on the stage, but we do have some special panelists who are joining us online. So first of all, please allow me to introduce Mr. Michael Bergman, owner of Bergman Marine. And as panelists, we're also joined by Mr. Thomas Christensen, Secretary General of MCC, who was also the previous speaker. So I did introduce all of our honored chairmen and our panelists. So Chairperson, you may now lead the session. Your floor is yours.
I'd like to appreciate that Minister Daniel Moon and the organizing team allowed to moderate this very important panel discussion on the digital data exchange and digital communication network. So actually, Seung-Hee Lee already introduced my panelists already. So as she introduced, we have totally 5 panelists here, including myself. So from the studio, there are 2 panelists, Dr. Sang Hyun Park and Dr. Jin Young Park. And also we have 2 more panelists from aboard, Thomas Christensen and Michael Bergman. I think we have some more time before directly proceeding our discussion. So, Michael, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit within 30 minutes? I will give you 30 minutes for your introducing by yourself.
Thank you, Sunbay. Yeah, it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here at the Korean Maritime Week. I am, as said, owner of BM Bergman Marine. I had been for several years the president of CIRM, and I'm also the secretary of the Port CDM Council, which evolved out of the STM validation project, and also are very active in IMO, IHO, EALA, and others. And we'll talk more about the effects of that later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Because you are now working very important work in the Bergman Marine, but I appreciated your participation in this discussion because of your expertise as the president of CIRM. So you can input many valuable ideas to our session. And also Thomas, good morning. What time is it there?
It's 20 minutes past 8 in the morning. So yeah. not that bad anymore.
Okay, you can use around 20 or 30 seconds for your introducing yourself.
Okay, thank you. So yes, as was mentioned, I am the Secretary General of, it was said MCC, which is actually short of the MCP Consortium. And before that, actually, that was mentioned in Jin's presentation. I was project manager for different e-navigation projects, including the Efficiency 2 project. And I was working as a project manager at the Danish Maritime Authority at that time.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And also, already Dr. Sang Hyun You, through your presentation, you already introduced yourself. He is a very important people in Korea working for the Korean PNT system. And the next panelist, Jinyoung Park, is also very important people in maritime digitalization, as he introducing some idea on the global maritime digital route testbed. So then let's start our discussion on the digital data exchange, especially the digital communication network in maritime sector. Personally, for the sake of facilitating our discussion today, I will ask questions I prepared by myself with regard to the presentation that you made just now, and also according to your expertise, respectively. After that, if we have some time more left, I will give you the panelists to have some questions each other freely, in free way. So all of you can make some question each other after my question finishes. So my first question goes to Michael Bergmans. Michael, we have listened to the 3 presentations today, just now, right? Did you listen to all presentation? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Then, what do you think about the interrelationship between 3 presentations in terms of the global maritime digital services, such as e-navigation or maritime autonomous surface ships, MaaS?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the very good presentations I heard today, which are all were talking about important aspect of digitalization in the maritime world. As we have heard from Thomas, the communication and the data exchange in a secure way is essential for us to do digitalization. Because when we take about e-navigation, it's about data exchange between ship and shore, shore and ship, and shore and shore. And that is only possible if we can actually exchange information. And when we take a look to maritime autonomous surface ships, something you asked for, MaaS can only work if they are communicating with the outside, getting information. When they are working autonomous, then they need to get the information on the area around them. They need to absorb those information and they need to use it to steer correctly and make good decisions in the artificial intelligence which are built in. But also you need to monitor those autonomous ships from the outside and may need to be in a position to actually interfere if something doesn't go right. So that also needs secure and safe information. So what we heard from Thomas was the MCP is very important that we have those secure identification and talk about. When I take a look to the discussion of Chin Park, important part I see in all of this development is that you were mentioning, Jin, quite a few different projects, which are all regional projects, European projects or other projects. What we are lacking of are projects validating and bringing forward to reality on a global basis, because ultimately solar ships are traveling, for example, from Busan to Europe. And they are not just in the waters of a certain region. So taking a look to the different aspects of validation being done in the different regions, the presentation of GMDRT, which you had, is showing us the next level, which is important to actually implement e-navigation on a global basis and not only on the regional basis. And the third presentation, which I also like very much, is the PNT. PNT is essential. If a system doesn't know where it is, it cannot navigate. If maritime autonomous ship gets wrong information on own positions, we'll see accidents. So taking into account resilience in definition of the position is important. It is not only important for manned ships, it's also important for unmanned ships. And therefore, this resilience is very essential. And taking into account that GNSS is vulnerable because of spoofing and spamming, the additional information like R mode or like ELORAN, giving additional information in to ensure that we are resilient in our positioning is essential. And as we saw in the presentation, it is essential for the systems themselves, for the master of the ship, the navigator of the ship, to know where they are in context of the reality, but also for those which are monitoring it, whether it is on a vessel traffic services or it is on a remote monitoring station for mass systems. So from that point of view, that P&T is essential. And one thing I want to point on as well is the essential of timing. We often talk about navigational and about positioning, which I also did and which is essential. But time is also essential, because if we do not have exact time, if the times of the system run out of sync because they are, for example, falsified, then you cannot communicate with other computers anymore. So the resilience of the timing is also a very important aspect besides resilience on positioning and have resilience navigation.
Thank you, Michael. You pointed out very essential factors in maritime digitalization totally that we should remind when you approach to the maritime digitalization. So based on your answers, I'd like to briefly highlight several important factors again in global maritime digitalizations. First thing is to get some kind of connectivity among stakeholders and services over the world to come through the maritime digitalization globally. And second thing is to get some kind of reliability of seamless services and resilient P&T, as you pointed out. And also last thing is to get some harmonization among services provided by different regions respectively, such as like the European side or Asian side, right? So, Michael, so if you agree with my point, my brief, Michael, could you tell us what is the most value of global maritime digital route testbed that Dr. Jin today made just now? So in terms of 3 points I just pointed out.
Yeah, thank you very much. GMDRT, I think I'm sure will bring us forward quite substantial. As I said before, the importance of having an international validation and testbed is first to validate that the systems which are installed regionally, which are used regionally, can interact with each other. Give an example on the maritime connectivity platform. So we do have a Korean instance of the maritime connectivity platform to help us communicate, exchange information, as Thomas has alluded to. We have with Navalink on the European side another instance of the MCP. Both work globally, of course, but if you are subscribing to one and not the other, you need to be able to exchange those information. So in essence, it is important that a ship which leaves, as the example I had before, Busan, and trying to call in Europe, they need to be able to communicate on all of the aspects on their voyage, be it the Singapore, the Malacca Straits, be it the Horn of Africa, be it the Suez Canal, be it when entering the Mediterranean or actually going around Gibraltar and coming to the Northern Sea. So those types of information to be exchanged on a global basis, early enough on a global basis, and not too late, will actually help to steer shipping. And we heard before in the discussion, for example, about the Green Deal and going green and reduce emission based on the IMO greenhouse gas resolutions. If we are exchanging information very early up front and have that on a global basis, can adjust speed and as such reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reducing fuel consumptions. So all of that is very important to be played on an international basis. And giving that from an industrial point of view, the shipping industry is not the largest industry, taking into account how many ships do we have, and as such, how many clients for ship electronics, compared to the clients using a smartphone, for example. You need to act globally, because only then the market has a value for you to create new tools. And as such, the GMTRT as a project and proving that internationally e-navigation is actually a beneficial item can first help IMO to create the right regulations, but also give to the industry the confirmation that the market is ready on a global basis to actually use e-navigation on a broader scale.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So actually, I think the what is it, regulatory approach is also very important to start maritime digitalization globally. But much more important thing is that the user-based approach is much more important. Yesterday, I meet with Mr. Andreas Noses, the Director General of Danish Maritime Authority. So he gives some idea. His concern on the global maritime digital route test bed. If we want to make successful of this project, when you carry out the feasibility study on the test bed, he said we should keep in mind the user-based approach. So, of course, we are going to start providing some kind of maritime MSI services first, but the service should be some kind of services from the user-based approaches. So if the, for example, shipping company want to some kind of digital services to get some real benefits from the test bed, so we can make test bed successful in the future. Anyway, the industrial approach is very important. So as the former president of the CIRM, Michael, one more idea is regarding the get some verification and certificate for their product from each country is very important. So very briefly, within 20 or 30 seconds, I will give you one more time to talk about that. Do you have any idea to facilitate the industry to produce some kind of digital equipment in the future to facilitate this global maritime digitalization? For example, we established some kind of international center for providing some kind of the validation and approval function center for the products made by industrial side jointly. I mean the international multilateral some certificate center, because if a company develop a software or some kind of digital equipment, they need to receive some kind of approval or validation, verification or certificate from each country. It's very difficult for them to further moving in developing the technology. So if several countries give some certificates together at the same time, it will be very easy for companies to proceed much more. So do you have any idea to establish some kind of international multilateral certificate center for facilitating this industry? So you can tell in very briefly.
Yeah, thanks, Sanbei. Certification is very essential for us for all the tools, for us as industry, for all the tools which are mandated or which are actually on board of bridges. So from that point of view, you are absolutely right. We have certain regions which have consolidated the approval and certification, like in Europe, the MARET. I think what we need to have is to have, as you were saying, bilaterals or reciprocal acceptance of the different certification. So if there is a certification done in one country based on standards like IEC standards and so on, of course, which are all accepted, then others should accept that. So we do not need, as industry, go over and over the certification because they are very expensive and will make the tools more expensive for the end users. So I think your idea of having a centralized is a good one. So I support that. We also need to take a look to accepting certification from one country through bilateral or multilateral agreements, for example, on an IMO or UN basis.
Okay, thank you so much. If you have some chance to do that, I want you to do such kind of pivotal role to make such idea come true in your future. And
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And my second discussion goes to Dr. Sang-Yeon Park. Dr. Park. Yes, you introduced the E-RORAN system and MF-VHF armored as one of the maritime resilient PNT today, right? Yes. So I believe that E-RORAN systems could be a useful alternative resilient PNT system when GNS or GPS satellite signals are attacked by jammer, because E-RORAN transmitting power is very strong enough to overcome such kind of jamming attack. So then how about the MF and VHF armored system? Is it also strong enough to overcome such kind of jamming?
네, 제가 답은 한국말로 드리도록 하겠습니다. 지금
I'll answer the question in Korean. So the question is, E-RORAN has immunity against jamming attack. So he explained about the power or output of E-jamming, E-RORAN. And in Korea, from 50 kilowatt to 150 kilowatt is the level of E-RORAN. And for resilience of PNT, we're discussing R-mode systems. They have MF and VHF R-mode. MF and VHF R-mode has strong enough power similar to E-RORAN. So the answer is that MF or VHF R mode is as powerful as E-RORAN. But as for middle frequency, the broadcasting is not at kilowatt level. Usually for MF, the broadcasting is done from 300 to 500 megawatt. For VHF, the broadcasting value is much lower than the E-RORAN. In the case of E-LORAN, the effective coverage ranges hundreds of kilometers. So the coverage of E-LORAN is hundreds of kilometers, several hundred kilometers. But as for MFR mode, the coverage range is smaller, shorter than the E-LORAN. And as for AIS or VDS, the coverage is relatively lower. So within the VHF coverage, the level of output or power is sufficient. Many people say that if we use E-LORAN system, we can become immune to jamming attack because E-LORAN uses electric frequency. So E-LORAN may also be vulnerable to jamming or spoofing attack. That's what many people say. But jamming is impossible for E-LORAN because E-LORAN has such a strong transmission power. Spoofing is to create a fake signal and conduct a spoofing attack. So as Thomas Christensen mentioned, authentication is very important to prevent spoofing and jamming. GNSS is vulnerable to spoofing, so we're discussing establishing an authentication system for GNSS. The same is true for R mode system and E-LORAN system. Authentication is very important to prevent spoofing or jamming attack against E-LORAN or R mode. So a lot of efforts are going on for standardization of authentication.
I think the jamming the satellite signal is very severe problems because it causes some kind of malfunction of ships operation, and also especially to be used for terrorist attack against ships or hijacking by pirates through the satellite signal jamming. So actually I have one more question to you, but I'm going to reserve this question after I listen to some kind of answer from the other panelists. Thank you, Sang-yeon. And next question goes to Thomas Christensen. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Sung-bae.
Yeah, good. Thomas, thank you for your presentation today. And I fully agree with your keywords. That is importance of the authentication and discoverability. Maybe you made this new word, discoverability in maritime digital services. In connection, I understand that maritime connectivity platform is operated based on a specific ID mechanism, right? Yeah,
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, right. So it's called Maritime Resource Name, MRN, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So then my question is that to what extent do we need to assign marine resource name to object? I mean, for example, the object composing digital maritime services, such as service itself, or digital equipment, or users on board the ships, or shore-based stakeholders, or actors, or organization. So would you please give us a detailed code cases applying marine resource names by MSI service, for example?
Right. So MRN, Maritime Resource Name, was originally created for use of the MCP, because in making MCP we needed unique identifiers to be able to assign to any entity that needs to exchange information with some other entity. And this has then been adopted later on by IALA to identify anything in their domain, and it has also been adopted by IHO, and I believe it is being also adopted by other organizations. So in MCP, any entity is assigned an MRN for unique identification, and then using MCP you can also assign a digital certificate. So the MRN will be the identifier, and the certificate will be the proof of the identity. So in many cases, when you have the exchange of information, then I think always you would need an MRN and a certificate of the provider of a service, of the provider of information. You will always want to know where the information is coming from. Like in the case of maritime safety information, you will certainly want to know that this is coming from the authority that is designated to give that information, not somebody else, like spoofing or something like we've heard about in PNT. Whether the receiver information should be given an identity and be able to authenticate itself is depending on the service. If we're talking about navigational warnings, maritime safety information, there's not really a need for the receiver of the information to be identified or to be authenticated. But in other cases where you have an information exchange, like for reporting purposes, you would need both the provider and the receiver of the information to be identified using an MRN and also to be authenticated with an associated digital certificate. So it depends on what kind of services that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Anyway, the MCP Maritime Connectivity Platform is a kind of open platform, as we know, while there are some kind of closed type of platform according to other instances of digital services nowadays. So there are many kinds of digital platform with different standards over the world, right?
I suppose there would be. I am not actually aware of any standard like the MCP that is intended to be used totally broadly for any kind of digital services, which is why we made it, because we think there's a gap here. We think this is something that the world needs.
Yeah, okay, anyway, actually not standard, but they are going to develop some kind of digital platform according to their technology respectively. So how we can secure some kind of harmonization or interoperabilities among these various platforms with different function or standards or techniques in each other. So, and what if we try to get harmonization or interoperability among different platforms through the global maritime digital route test bed in near future? What kind of point should we keep in mind among participants in the test bed to get some harmonization among platforms?
Well, this issue about platforms is also addressed in the IALA guideline on platforms that I briefly mentioned in my presentation. So in that guideline, it states that we need platforms, and they need to provide different functionalities. And I mentioned two core functionalities, which was authentication and discoverability. But what it also points out that these platforms should be harmonized. We should not have different platforms that operate in different ways according to different standards. It's the same as the technical services. We need the same specifications. We need standards for that. You could also regard the platforms as services, and they can be specified as services, and they must also be harmonized. In that way, you should have either, as we in the MCP is preaching, we should have one decentralized platform. So you have many different instances, but they are working according to the same standards, which is the same as having many different platforms that are harmonized. So it is important that these platforms are standardized in the same way as the technical services themselves are.
Okay, thank you. With regard to these questions, I'd like to ask Michael again. Do you have any idea to build up these answers made by Thomas Christensen? But because of the time limitation for our session, I'm going to reserve this question. So if you give the chance to the answer or build up much more idea on Thomas' later stage, or if we conclude this session without any further Q&A session, please give me some ideas through email, even though we cannot discuss directly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And last questions it goes to Dr. Jin Young Park. Hi, Dr. Jin. Yeah. So your presentation is so impressive, actually. And I'm in line with your opinions, especially new trend, as the mega trends such as e-navigation for green to greener shippings, e-navigation with AI, and also e-navigation for mass, as well as the digital service over the world. So I also believe that e-navigation is a kind of digital infrastructure to support this kind of new trend or mega trend as you talk. So in this regard, would you please select what kind of main components the e-navigation has as the digital infrastructure to support such a mega trend in maritime digitalization?
Thank you. If I should select just one, I like to select the connectivity or connectivity platform, because all we have to implement for new goals and new trends is on the tier of the connectivity. I like to say that the connectivity is the status for securely and reliably communicate between the entities. That is the core basis for all the engineering works and implementations what we are trying to achieve. So I can say that definitely the connectivity platform is the core.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Park. And even though I have already asked this question to Michael Borgman at the beginning, I'd like to ask same question to you, because you are the key person carrying out the feasibility study on global maritime digital route testbed. So my question is that if the global maritime digital route testbed is very successful in the near future, is there any possibility to globally establish a joint validation or some approval center as a kind of international multilateral certification scheme for such emerging digital softwares or equipments on board ships among countries? The industry have some difficulties in getting their certificates for their product from each respective countries, as I pointed out at the beginning time, while global maritime digital route testbed would be able to support industry to solve their difficulties, I believe. Do you have any idea?
If I should say yes or no, I should say yes. But I like to also say that we should have some multi-phase approach for that, because we should provide some technical environment for proof of concept and verification of our implementation and the validation of our concept and the approval of all the equipments that could be used for the services or operations. So at the beginning, I believe we should provide some functionalities or facilities to support the proof of concept, to convince all the stakeholders that has some relationship to these activities. So, but at the end, there should be some, many of commercial entities or companies, they should also have some difficulty to acquiring, getting certification from classification society. in this regard, if we say that so far we just needed to get approval for equipment itself, but if we think about the maritime services in the context of navigation or for mass, there should be some connectivity between ship and shore. That means we need to provide some certification procedures that has two phases. Just for the first one is the for equipment. The other facet is the service subscription. So in that regards, I think there should be that kind of facilities or center, and in the end, I think that would be very helpful. And
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jens. Yeah, it is true. And if we want to facilitate the maritime digitalization globally, we should come together with industry because they are key parts to facilitate and produce some kind of digital equipment. Thank you. So I'd like to come back to the Dr. Sang-yeon Park. I reserved the questions. We talking about the importance of resilient PNT, but I also think the accuracy of the both system, E-LORAN system, and as well as the MF and VHF R mode system is also very important, as much as cyber security is critical. So is it because the accuracy of PNT is one of the core factors to secure safety of maritime digital services in the future. So how is it about the PNT accuracy of the MF, VHF R mode? Is it also possible for ships to get their position accuracy? For example, up to centimeters level of position accuracy, just like a differential GPS system. What do you have any idea on answer to this question?
Wow, it's a very, very challenging subject. 네, 엄청 어려운 도전적인 과제를 말씀해 주셨습니다.
So that's a very challenging task. For now, in the case of E-LORAN, the positioning accuracy is from 8 to 20 meters. And as for R mode, MF or VHF R mode, its positioning accuracy is 10 meter at maximum. As you mentioned, the satellite navigation system or global satellite navigation system is these days presenting centimeter level precision and accuracy. And he asked whether that would be possible for R mode as well. I don't think R mode can achieve centimeter level precision. Maybe 1 meter level precision is, I think, the primary target to be achieved. There are many researches being done to achieve 1 meter level precision in R mode. Maybe we can provide more information more frequently. So there are research activities being done to achieve sub-meter level accuracy.
Both system, E-LORAN system, and also MF R mode system functions dependent from the satellite.
Yes. No, actually, they should work independent from satellites. So if GPS jamming takes place, E-LORAN and R mode can offer the service independent of the satellite. So our target here in Korea is to
Thank you so much.
achieve
So now
14
you are,
days of
operating
seamless
the
service through
demonstration
R mode
project of
and
E-LORAN
E-LORAN.
in the western part. So I wish proceed full scale project all over the Korean peninsula in the future. Yeah, thank you. And we have 1 or 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give a chance to Michaels. Do you have any further idea on the answers made by Thomas regarding the way to get some harmonization or interoperability among different types of digital platforms.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what is important is you have different systems like port community systems which have internal exchange. If we can agree and validate that the use of international standards like the S100 series of standards, S421, S211, and so on and so forth, are used for interchanging. What is used internally in the system is less relevant. But as Thomas was alluding to, we need to have the capability for the different systems to be able to exchange. And we're working in the MCC to ensure that different MCP instances can actually interact with each other.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Times are flying because I'm together with so excellent experts today. So I'm so regretful to conclude our discussion right now due to the time allocated for our session. However, I'm so happy to be able to discuss a lot of useful matters on digital data exchange and also digital communication network in maritime digitalization together with so excellent panelists today. So I think all our panelists, thank you so much for your participation, for your input, so valuable input, and also thank you so much for the audience who joining this session together. I conclude my session with this. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, Chairperson, for leading this session. And thank you to all of our panelists. So as our Chairperson just mentioned, that yes, we do not have fully a lot of time to discuss this topic. But I think it was really fruitful discussion that we can have in-depth discussion with the renowned speakers and panelists from home and abroad. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, actually we have only one more session left for the 2021 Korea Maritime Week. So we'd like to have about a 10-minute break and we will come back. So ladies and gentlemen, please be with us until the very end and also with us until closing ceremony. Thank you very much and see you soon.